Hi guys, hopefully you can see me okay. Thank you to those of you that watched the 10-minute test video that I posted a while ago. So this is going to be the full version. The idea being that we're going to watch Alien from 1979, my favourite movie of all time, and I'm going to talk about it. I've arranged the camera so you can hopefully see a little bit of the screen so you can get an idea of which part of the movie I'm actually watching. If you do want to watch along with me, then please do. That would be great fun. I'm going to be watching the theatrical version, and I've kind of put it at the 00 timestamp, and it's paused right at the beginning of the movie. So I'm going to count down and start the film. I am going to pause the movie at the halfway point simply because I'll need to change my microphone. I don't think my microphone will last for an entire 2 hours. So I'm going to have to pause to swap my microphone over. So I will explain where I'm at when I pause it. It will be just after the chest burster sequence. I think that's about the halfway mark. So let's get to it, shall we? I'm looking forward to this. It's a movie I've watched hundreds of times over the years, literally. So I've got absolutely no problem with doing it again and talking about it. Okay, so I'm going to start it now. 3, 2, 1, go. I'll just turn the volume down a little bit so it isn't picked up on the camera. And there we have the 20th Century Fox logo. As I said in the test video, whenever I see that on a movie, it makes me think of Alien, because I've just seen it so many times. So I would have first seen this in 1981 on a Betamax tape. And as I said in the test video, I was aware of this movie even before I saw it. Even back then, many, many years before the internet, because I had a school friend that used to buy a magazine that was available in the UK called Starburst that focused primarily on science fiction. And I can remember we were in primary school one day in the playground, and I would have been about 8 or 9 years old. And he brought in a copy of Starburst that had an article on a movie called Alien with some sort of behind the scenes photos. And that was the first I knew about this movie. And it really piqued my interest. And then when it opened, those of you that watch my channel regularly will know that I had an aunt when I was growing up that ran the local cinema in the town where I lived, so I could get in and see movies for free. Well, my dad went to see this at the cinema, and I can remember him coming back wearing a dark green t-shirt with the word Alien written across it in white letters. And I asked him about it, but he gave me very little information. I think he obviously realized I was too young at that point, although it was only a few years after that I did actually get to see it. So I was always very jealous that he saw this at the cinema. And I have seen it on the big screen, but I'll talk about that a little bit later. So here we get the very first model shot of the Nostromo towing vehicle pulling the big refinery. A lot of people think that the whole thing that you see there is the Nostromo, but the Nostromo is just the tug, the craft at the front, and the rest of the big structure is just the refinery. Fantastic model shots. Every model shot in this movie was supervised by Ridley Scott. He went to Bray Studios when he wasn't filming on the main stages and supervised the shots of the models. And they're just beautiful. And this whole movie is aged incredibly well. This sequence here with the camera slowly panning through the empty corridors of the Nostromo is Ridley Scott's favourite part. And it is a lovely moment because it really shows off the production design and the sets. And at the end of that corridor, there is a mirror, which is reflecting the corridor to give it the impression that it's twice as long. First little sign of those little dippy birds that we used to get in the 70s. I was going to buy another one of those. Apparently you can still get them. Maybe I should get one as an Alien fan and have it in my room, just dipping all day long. So yeah, the first time I saw this movie was on a Betamax tape in 1981. And my memory of it is a little fuzzy, but it was about 3 years later, I want to say, that it was first shown on ITV in the United Kingdom. And I recorded it off the television, and then obviously having my own copy, I proceeded to watch it literally every day. I had a summer holiday from school where I was off school for 6 weeks, and I watched it nearly every day. And luckily, my mum and dad would either be working or they would be out doing other things. So I had a window of opportunity every day where I could use the TV for a few hours and not get in anyone's way. So again, this movie is aged incredibly well. The little flat screens that they use for the computer displays still look very modern. And I love the shot here of the emergency helmet that's reflecting the information on the screen. It looks like the helmet is actually watching the computer display, but it isn't. It's just sat on top of the console. So this is Mother waking up the ship. And we get our first lovely shot of the hypersleep chamber and the corridor. All the lighting on the Nostromo is practical, meaning that all the lights you see are the lights that actually light up the set. If you look very closely, you can see very clearly on the 4K that the sides of the corridor, you can see tinges of gold-coloured paint, because originally this was gold-coloured. And Ridley Scott changed his mind on the colour and they had to spray paint it white, but you can see where they missed bits, and they did it in a rush. And one of my favourite sets in the whole of the Nostromo is the hypersleep chamber. And I love this moment where it's all dark, and then as the pods open up, it gets really light and bright, and it's beautiful. And we get our first view of some of the players in the movie. Looks lovely on 4K, this does. It really, really looks nice. And you have to look out for these little symbols designed by Ron Cobb. This one is like a hypersleep symbol. There's a little person laying down with a big triangle above them. So there's John Hurt, Kane. First character to wake up is the first character to die in the movie, which is a bit of a shame. He's lying in between Yaphet Kotto and Ian Holm. And there we can see Harry Dean Stanton. And I believe to the left of Ian Holm's character is Veronica Cartwright as Lambert. As I said in the test video, John Hurt plays this really well, looking really groggy, as if he's had a really long sleep and he doesn't really want to wake up. We all know that feeling. And the other thing I like about the production design and all of the sets is how you can see that the ceiling. Ridley Scott told them to lower all the ceilings because he couldn't show them on camera with it being widescreen, and he wanted to give it a very confined space. So here we are, all of our crew members eating breakfast with overlapping dialogue, and Jones the cat is eating from his little bowl that I said in the test video that all the times I've watched this, but I only recently noticed that it had his name written on the bowl, Jones, the little tabby cat. And there we have Parker and Brett discussing money and bonuses. They've only just woken up and that's their first thought is money. And I'm always look at Sigourney Weaver, how beautiful she was. And all the technicians that worked on the movie had a massive crush on her. And she knew this, but she kind of played along with it apparently. And she had a t-shirt made up for the production staff that had a big chest burster on it. And she gave each of the technicians a t-shirt, which they all really appreciated. So you can see here, you can see how low the set is. Absolutely fantastic. And it was an enclosed set, apparently. There were no removable walls. So if an actor had to go from the computer room to the galley, they couldn't just step off the set. They had to walk down the proper corridors to get there. So they really did feel like they were living in the Nostromo. Oh, God, I often wish, if I was a billionaire, I think I would have a replica of the Nostromo built as a one-to-one scale and kind of live in it. I'd love that. much like Peter Jackson did with the Hobbit hole, didn't he? With Bilbo Baggins' house, he had the replica made in his own house. I'd love to do that with the Nostromo. So here we have Captain Dallas communicating with Mother, who is the computer on board the ship, to ask why we've been woken up so early. And the computer room, Ron Cobb, one of the designers, said that the computer room, Ridley Scott wanted it to look like the inside of a cathedral, and all the little lights were meant to look like little votive candles that were lit, which I thought was a nice touch. So here we have the crew sitting in the actual cockpit of the Nostromo and waking up all the systems. This is where they find out that they're nowhere near Earth. And they've been woken up way too early. If you look very closely, you can see how they went with the sort of used future of the seats, like the seat that John Hurt is sitting on. You can see sort of rips in the leather and bits of tape holding the rip together as if it's been really battered, and just fantastic. Even the clothes that they wear. You'll see there's a shot coming up in a moment of Veronica Cartwright where you can see the collar of her shirt is very frayed, as if she's worn the same bits of clothing all the time. Little details like that are just fantastic. Again, beautiful, beautiful model shot there. And I love the vector graphic displays that they have on the screens. They still look quite modern. I mean, this was made in 1979. It's just incredible. I think it was entirely made in England with a primarily British crew. All the technicians that worked on it were British. And obviously Ridley Scott is a British filmmaker, but I'm really proud of that fact. I love that this was made in England. Yeah, when I said I'd have a replica of this built if I was a billionaire, I don't think I'd go with these really dingy dark corridors. I think I'd be too nervous to walk down them on my own. Right, so here we are. This is where Captain Dallas explains to the crew that the reason they've been woken up early is because the computer has intercepted a signal, which they need to go and investigate. I love Tom Skerritt. I love all the actors in this, but they're so well cast. And Tom Skerritt is such a laid-back captain. Yeah, they all play fantastic parts. So there, if we can see the fraying on Veronica Cartwright's collar. Little details like that just really add to it all. And I like how Brett in this scene is wearing a Hawaiian shirt. Whether that says something about his character that he refuses to wear company supplied clothes, he just sorts of he likes to do his own thing and wear Hawaiian shirts, make him feel more comfortable. So here we get kind of the first interaction with Ian Holmes' Ash character, who's explaining that if they do investigate this signal, they will be entitled to a bonus, which immediately perks up Parker because, as I say, he's only in it for the money. So the minute he hears that, he's all for it, and they set off towards LV-426. So we get this extended sequence of the Nostromo towing vehicle detaching from the refinery and then making its way down towards the planet. And Ridley Scott said that he always thought the act of landing a big spaceship was a very dangerous thing to do in real life if we had the ability to do that. And he wanted to kind of make it seem dangerous for the movie. So you'll see as they get nearer to the surface of the planet that everybody's getting more stressed and they're all really busy doing their own thing to do everything they can to get this big hunk of metal to land safely on this planet. I think this is the only bit of the visual effects that now stands out is the matte of the planet flying past the window there. But that's only a small shot. But the rest of it is absolutely glorious. So there's the towing vehicle on the docking arm that's going to get released. So that little ship is towing all of the mass behind it. And also some of the graphics that you'll see, such as that one there. And towards the end of the movie, when Ripley is escaping on the Narcissus, the shuttle at the end of the movie, you'll see another computer screen that flashes up the word Purge. Both of those were reused in Blade Runner when they're in the spinners, the flying police vehicles. You see exactly the same graphics. So whether they reuse the shots or they just reuse the graphics, I'm not sure, but they definitely get used again. Obviously, you can't hear this because I've got the volume really low, but the Jerry Goldsmith score for this movie is just superb. There's some beautiful, beautiful music. Interestingly, the shot here with the planet, if you look closely, you can see the planet is actually moving as if it's slowly revolving. And the way they achieved that is they had a large photograph of paint that had been mixed in oil. So it was created like swirly clouds. And they had like a large slide made of that picture. And then they would get like a large white football and project that picture onto the football. And then as they slowly panned the slide down, it gave the impression that these clouds were moving across this sphere, which is effectively just a white ball. But it's such a fantastic effect. And it works so well. So now we get to the actual large model that is being filmed on a stage where it's being lowered on a forklift truck, on the arms of a forklift truck, because this scale of the Nostromo model was so large and so heavy that they had to put it on the arms of a forklift truck and lower the arms to give it the impression that it was landing. Ridley was always annoyed that the lights on the underside of the Nostromo weren't in a straight line, that they're all very fiddly, but I kind of like it. I think it makes it look more rugged. So here we go. They're like breaking into the atmosphere, about to land on this surface, and they're getting knocked around. They're getting turbulence. So there we are. That's the model getting lowered on a forklift truck. Again, really good parallax there on the vector graphics of the landscape as they get nearer. And then we get a really good close-up shot of one of the landing struts as it catches against a large rock, which obviously causes everything inside the ship to get buckled around. There we go. Yeah, I love that. So it's not like Star Trek where they can just beam down. And it's not like a 1950s science fiction movie where they can just gently float down onto the planet. You know, it's a real dangerous thing to do in the world of Alien, to land a big ship like that. So they've got a bit of damage on the Nostromo, but nothing that can't be repaired. LV-426, terrible weather. It's like living in northern England in the winter. So all of these shots here, like the handheld shots, that would be Ridley Scott holding the camera. Because this was kind of his second movie after The Duelists. At that point in his career, he was operating the camera. So a lot of the actors didn't like that because they felt that it detached the director from the actors. And he spent most of his time looking down the lens of a camera. But my God, the look of this movie. There's so many things about this movie that I like. That's why it's my favorite movie of all time. The production design, the actors, the special effects, the cinematography, just the look of it, the lighting, it's just fantastic. I'll never ever get bored of watching this movie. So now Brett and Parker are pissed. Brett and Parker, they're both pissed because now, even though they're getting paid, because there's been some damage, you know, they've got to repair all the damage. So now they're annoyed that they've got more work to do. So there's Veronica Cartwright, already looking nervous and smoking a cigarette, not quite looking at ease. She is the audience's representation of fear, apparently. That's what she was told that was her character. So her role is to be scared, and just she doesn't want to be there. Whereas Kane is he's the one that's very inquisitive, and he's the first one to volunteer to go out on the walk towards this signal. So there's Ash analysing the atmosphere. He's telling them that the signal's within walking distance, and that the actual atmosphere, he describes it as almost primordial. So they'll definitely need to wear pressurized suits if they go outside. Very dangerous environment. Again, I love how you can see the roof behind them, the ceiling with all the monitors on. Just bloody brilliant, honestly. Just so fantastic. I'm going to be saying that word a lot throughout this, I'm sure. But again, I just want to highlight how superb the 4K is. Luckily, I've got a decent TV. I had just a normal 4K television for about 5 or 6 years, which was what make was it? An LG. And it was okay as a television, but it couldn't handle blacks very well. So whenever you were watching a dark movie, it would be more like a grey colour than a true inky black. And then I was reading up about OLED televisions and the way they work in terms of they would light individual pixels on the screen. So if you want a movie that's got lots of dark shots, what the TV does is it switches off those pixels. So they're just not on. So it's just black. And this Samsung that I've got, that I've had for about 5 years now, is an OLED 4K television. And the difference is just night and day. If you can afford to upgrade to an OLED television, then you should definitely do it if you like watching 4K movies. I think this TV cost me about £1,400. But I think at that point, OLED TVs were still fairly new technology. So I'm sure they're a lot cheaper now. But when we recently moved house, this was the one thing in terms of my kit that I was really nervous of because it's so delicate, this big TV. I was so frightened it was going to get damaged in transit. But it made it in one piece. So I was talking there, but the shot of the 3 crew members exiting the Nostromo in the spacesuits was actually children. Ridley Scott used 3 children dressed in smaller versions of the spacesuits, so that when they stood on the set, it made everything look a lot bigger. And 2 of those children were 2 of his sons, apparently. A little interaction there between Parker and Ripley. She basically tells them to F off because they're giving her a hard time. Again, look at the lighting there, fantastic. Yeah, that's definitely Northern England in the wintertime. So here we have the spacesuits, which were designed by the costume designer John Mollo, who worked on Star Wars, the original Star Wars. Apparently, there's certain elements of this that were meant to have a sort of samurai feel to it, in terms of the shoulder pads that they wear. And they had tremendous difficulty, the actors, with these suits, because they would pass out because they would be sealed in the suit. and eventually they would be breathing too much carbon dioxide. So you would see their visor would start to steam up, and it would make them feel lightheaded. So they'd have to keep having a break, to take the helmets off. There's lots of behind-the-scenes photos of some of the actors sat around on the set wearing the spacesuit without a helmet, looking absolutely exhausted. There's a little pussycat, there's Jonesy. Now that shot there of the sun is just a huge lamp in the studio on a stand. So you're effectively just looking at a lamp that's pointing directly at the camera. But Ridley lit it in such a way that it looked like an alien moon or a sun low on the horizon. Just fantastic, such a simple thing, but it just worked so well. If you look at the gloves of the spacesuits, they're actually gloves that ice hockey players wear. They're like really chunky gloves. So when you next watch an ice hockey game, just look at their hands. I've seen lots of behind-the-scenes pictures of this sequence where they're making their way towards the derelict spaceship, or the big croissant, as Ridley Scott calls it. And they built some bloody huge indoor sets for this. And the sequences that they filmed were never used in the final edit. They shot a sequence where the three of them were traversing across like a desert floor that was fairly flat with a few rocks scattered around it. But they just never used those shots. Obviously, Ridley thought that he wanted to stick with the real rocky, craggy look. But it was a huge set. Apparently, it was one of the biggest sets that had ever been made for a movie at that point. If you look online, you might be able to find it. I know I've got photographs of it in one of the many making of Alien books that I have. And these shots here, which are supposed to be from the cameras inside the astronauts' helmets, were made by just Ridley using an old, one of the very first videotape cameras, the commercial sort that you could buy to use to film your holidays. He just had one of those and just filmed the model on the set and then played it back through the monitor. And it looks so real. The way he filmed it just gives the model ship such scale. And this shot here, the little lights on the astronauts' helmets, they're just little sticks with a little bulb on top of it, like moving along a track. But yeah, these shots here. And apparently they would loosen the wires on the camera, so it would cause the signal to be interfered, and just like fantastic. Who else would think of doing that? Honestly, Ridley Scott is such a genius. Easily one of my favourite directors. I'm going to do a video where I pick my top 5 favourite directors of all time. Spoilers, but I think it's safe to say that Ridley Scott will be my number 1, I'm sure, because he's responsible for my favourite movie of all time and my second favourite movie of all time. I mean, in terms of production design, this sequence here where they're walking down this corridor is amazing. It just looks so unreal and unlike anything we'd ever seen before. But like Ridley Scott said, that could very easily have looked like the inside of a 1950s diner if it was just one element was out in terms of the lighting or the design of it. But it just looks incredible. So there's Kane, Lambert and Dallas investigating inside of the derelict ship, and they're about to find an opening which will lead them into a very big set, which I'm sure if they made this movie today, it would be a digital set. But back then, they built this for real, and it still looks amazing, which is the actual room with the so-called space jockey. So the alien pilot of whatever this ship is sat in a big chair. And it's been there for so long, it's kind of fossilized in place. Those of you that have seen Prometheus, if you're like me, you would be a little bit disappointed with what they did with this space jockey, because they treated the space jockey as being a suit. So what you're looking at there in terms of this creature sat in the chair is not the creature, it's the suit that it's wearing. And then inside that is a thing called an engineer, which is like a large, white, bald-headed basketball player. and I thought that was a real cop-out. I wanted that thing that we see there to be up and about, walking and talking. And the original script for Prometheus, when it was a true Alien prequel, was written by a writer called John Spates. And I found that script online. So I read his script. And in his script, the space jockeys looked like that. And they would walk around and speak a foreign language with subtitles. And it was quite a bizarre script, but I think it was a damn good script. And it probably would have been a very good movie. And it's such a shame that what turned out, what was supposed to be an Alien prequel, morphed into what we got, which was Prometheus, which they called going off on a tangent. And I remember following the production of that movie really closely. And when I started to read that they're not referring to it as an Alien movie anymore, I can remember thinking, oh, for God's sake, why did you have to go and do that? But then again, part of me also said that they didn't need to explain this, that the fun with Alien is there's so much about it that can go unexplained. It's more mysterious not knowing what this creature is or where it came from or why it's got a ship full of these eggs. But Ridley Scott always said that he saw this as a battle cruiser and that the eggs were a weapon, and they treated the aliens as weapons, which is understandable because they are vicious, as we know. H.R. Giger, the actual designer of all of the alien side of things. So Ron Cobb was in charge of designing the Nostromo and the spaceships, and then H.R. Giger was involved with designing anything to do with the alien. So the spaceship, the egg, the facehugger, the chestburster, the creature. And I remember with the space jockey set, H.R. Giger was very upset because apparently he hadn't finished painting the space jockey, but they had to shoot on it because they had a schedule that they had to meet. So H.R. Giger was always very upset that the space jockey looks a lot paler in the movie than it was supposed to be. It was meant to be a lot darker than it's shown there. So there goes John Hurt's Kane being lowered down into the warehouse or the cargo area, whatever you want to call it. It always annoys me that these shots here where Kane's been lowered down, you can see that isn't John Hurt, that's just a stuntman. It's not John Hurt's face, but we'll let that one go. So there he is, getting lowered into the egg chamber. Lovely, lovely matte shot there to give it scale. And then as we get to the close-up view, we get the lovely effect of the mist created by a laser, which was borrowed from The Who, apparently. Apparently The Who were doing a tour at the time they were working on this movie, and they were using a lot of lasers on this tour. And one of the crew saw this effect and recommended it to Ridley, which he then used in the egg chamber. And it works really, really well. It's a fantastic idea. I mean, look at that. It looks superb, doesn't it? It's really creepy. I can only imagine what this must have been like watching this in the cinema in the 70s. When you think of other films that came around at about that time, we'd have had Star Wars. But this is on a whole different kind of tone and level in terms of science fiction. It's just incredible. So the idea is he's breaking the membrane, which in my mind wakes up some of the eggs. It's the second he breaks that blue membrane, that's giving the eggs a stimuli to make them aware that something is moving around out there. That's just the way I think. I may be wrong, but that's the way I always see it. So here we have the horrible, fleshy alien eggs that, again, when you see these things up close, look so real in terms of how organic they are and just like really fleshy and squidgy. Ugh, horrible. And the little detail I like here is you can see the drips dripping upwards. And then the effect there of something moving around inside is actually Ridley Scott's hands wearing marigold gloves. Apparently he's got his hands like that and he's wiggling his fingers. Blah, 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 blah. And that's giving the effect that we can see there of the face hugger moving around inside the egg. Great sound effect of the egg opening, that sort of like really sinewy and just look at that. It looks so real, just made of like raw meat with the veins on it. And don't look in. There we go. I wonder how many people screamed in the cinema when that moment happened. There's Ash waiting for them to come back. And I think obviously he knows what's out there. He knows what they're going to see. I think this is all part of Weyland-Yutani's plan. And so he's not surprised when he sees them come back with something attached to Kane's suit. He's almost excited. And here's Ripley doing, bless her, exactly the right thing. She realizes that there's an alien creature in the airlock with them and that they need to be quarantined. So she's refusing to let them in until they've been decontaminated, much to their chagrin. But she's absolutely right. She's doing the correct thing. And interestingly, Captain Dallas is just so shaken up by what's happened. He's sort of thinking, sod the rules, just let us in. We need to help him. But she's in the right, he's in the wrong. And then, of course, Ash takes it upon himself to just let them in. So she'll have a little conversation with him about that later in the movie. Yeah, so I saw the director's cut of this in the cinema. It was released, I'm trying to think what year it was. Was it about 2013? But they re-released it for Halloween for a few days in cinemas. And it was a new cut, the director's cut, which is interesting because the director's cut is actually shorter than the theatrical cut. So Ridley added a few scenes, a few extra scenes, and then he trimmed a lot of what he called fat, where he thought some shots went on too long. So inevitably, we ended up with a slightly shorter movie. And I went to see this at a cinema at Meadow Hall in Sheffield. And the bloody projectionist screwed it up, didn't he? Like a twit. And it completely ruined the experience. So for like the first 10 minutes of the movie, the horizontal hold of the projector was slightly out. So you could see like a part of the bottom of the picture appearing at the top. And it completely ruined it. And nobody was getting up to complain. I can remember that the cinema was about half full. And I thought, well, bugger this, I'm going to go and complain. And I remember walking back out and finding a member of the staff and telling them there was a problem. And about 5 minutes after that, they corrected it. But it completely ruined the experience for me. And I actually asked them that if I could have a refund on my ticket, but they refused. And yeah, I was really, really annoyed with that. But I've kind of seen it many times on a bigger screen because where we used to live 3 or 4 years ago, I had a big movie room with a big, like a 6-foot wide screen and a video projector. And of all the movies I watched on that setup, I probably watched this one the most. So I'd like to think I've seen it projected on a fairly big screen quite a lot of times. But I always think that now, as I look at this now, we're seeing it in better quality than they would have seen it back in the 70s when it was originally projected. So that's something to be thankful for. When I think of the amount of times I watched this on VHS, and it wasn't even on widescreen, it was just in 4:3 as I recorded it off the television. And now I've got it in like pristine quality. It's just fantastic. As a movie lover, we're really lucky with things like this in terms of the technology. So Kane is now in the med bay, and they've done a scan and realised that the face hugger has shoved something down his throat, and Dallas just wants to cut it off him. And Kane is saying, "But if we do, it might kill him. Will you accept responsibility?" And Dallas is absolutely sticking to his guns, saying, yeah, we've got to try and get it off him. So they're about to cut into one of the fingers, and it's going to spurt acid all over the floor. So again, what a fantastic idea that this creature and the creature that this will create has bloody acid for blood. I mean, what a defense mechanism, as they say. So this is a fun little moment where they're tracing the acid burning through the different decks of the Nostromo. And they end up getting to a point where Dallas asks Brett for his pen so he can use his pen to judge if it's slowing down. And I had one of these pens. These pens that they're using in Alien, I remember they were just commercial pens that you could buy. And I remember having one of those as a kid. And I wish I still had the damn thing. I can remember the design of it looking exactly like that pen that he gets off Brett. It's just coming up now. So if you're watching this along with me, if you just look at this pen that he hands to Dallas and the design of it with the little end, the cap on the end of it. I definitely had one of those pens. And similarly, the watches that they wear, if you can try and see in some of the shots the watches, you can kind of see it there on Dallas's wrist. It's a Casio watch that they kind of bought twice and then glued them together. So they're wearing a Casio watch that's made up of two screens. And Casio, quite a while ago, I think it was about 5 or 6 years ago, did they re-released that model of watch. Not the one they used in the movie where they bought two, but the watch they used to create the one that they wear. You could buy it again from Casio. And I fair wish I'd have bought one, because I think that would have been a cool little thing to own, because they used them in Alien. But one of the books that I bought to do with the making of Alien is called The Alien Vault. I've got it down here, actually. And it comes with a lot of kind of extras inside that you can take out, blueprints and things. And one of the things it comes with is a patch, the Nostromo patch there you can see on Parker's shoulder. A really good sort of representation of that patch, which is quite cute. I just like having little things like that. Just completely pointless bits of memorabilia, but it's quite fun. Right, so poor old Kane is out for the count, and the facehugger is doing its thing, unbeknownst to the crew and to us as an audience. We can see a few more of the Ron Cobb symbols there above the door as the camera's slowly panning around the medbay. Again, beautiful, beautiful set. Just look at that, completely self-contained, practical lighting, just absolutely fantastic. And there's Ash in the corner, looking at something on the screen. I always think it looks like an eyeball. I don't quite know what he's looking at there, but it's something quite bizarre. You can see that's a videotape that he's just paused, because if you look at the screen, you can see the tracking lines where he's paused the video. So this is where Sigourney Weaver expresses her annoyance that Ash let them in through the airlock, even though she thought they should be quarantined. I emailed one of the technicians that worked on this movie, a guy called Dennis Lowe. And I found out about Dennis Lowe because he had I don't know whether it's still active, but he had a website, and he talked about the various movies that he worked on. And he made a series of documentaries called Alien. What was it called? He made about 5 or 6 episodes of it, and each one was where he was interviewing different people that worked on Alien. And these were more kind of the technicians and not people that showed up in the official making of documentaries. But they were still fascinating people, really interesting. And one of the documentaries that he did was where he interviewed the driver, Ridley Scott's driver. And he was the guy that would pick up Ridley Scott from his home every day and drive him to the set when they were making Alien. And he'd like do various tasks like take film to be developed and things like that. Really interesting documentary. You must look him up. His name's Dennis Lowe, Lowe. And hopefully his website's still there and he's got these documentaries that he made. Really well, good documentaries. But this driver, he shows that as a gift when they finished the movie, Ridley Scott obviously made good friends with this driver because he was spending time with him every day, that they gave him the actual Kane's burial shroud figure. So that's the figure that we see in the movie that's sort of wrapped in bandages, like mummified, that they eject from the Nostromo as part of Kane's funeral. And he's got that actual thing. And he shows it in the documentary. It's only about that big, carved out of wood. And you think, oh my God, can you imagine if you put that on eBay, the amount of money that would be worth, because that's the actual thing that was filmed that's in Alien. But he's got loads of little anecdotes in these documentaries, really interesting. And I emailed him because he had his contact details on his website, just to tell him how proud I was that this movie was made in England. And that the people that worked on it were British and all this sort of thing. And bless him, he replied with a fairly lengthy email saying thank you so much, and how he was also really proud of the fact that he worked on this movie. And his name's in the credits. You'll see his name at the end of the credits. And it was just fantastic that I had that little bit of a connection with somebody that worked on this movie. And I lost the damn email. I had it for the longest time. And then for some reason, I can't remember what happened, whether I'd accidentally deleted it without realizing. And then the 30 days went by where my recycle bin was purged and I lost it. And I was absolutely heartbroken when I lost it. But yeah, it was really good to have that little bit of a interaction with somebody that actually worked on the movie. It was fantastic. But yeah, check him out, Dennis Lowe. Hopefully my microphone is still working. Yeah, it is. So let's do a quick time check. Let's see where we're at. So I am 47 minutes in. So as I say, after the chest burster sequence, I'm going to pause and switch microphones. And I'm also going to upload this as 2 videos, by the way. So the one you're currently watching is part 1. So if you are watching along with me, then please pause the movie as I pause it and then start the next video and you can carry on from there. I hope you're enjoying this, by the way. I'm aware I am talking quite a lot. If you were with me, if we were friends and you came over to my house to watch this movie, I would not be rabbiting on all the way through it. I hate that. I would be very respectful and be quiet and let you watch the movie. So I'm only doing this to give you an idea of how much I love this film. So I hope you enjoyed this. And I hope you're not falling asleep. The other thing I hate as a movie lover is when you're watching a movie with somebody and they fall asleep and you look across to say, and you're about to just go, are you enjoying this? And they're asleep and you think, oh, for God's sake. My other half, she's a little tinker for doing that. She'll be really excited to watch a particular movie and you put it on and after about half an hour, she'll be sat on the sofa with a blanket over her and she'll be asleep. And I never do that either. I mean, I'm a movie lover, but I can't sleep sitting up. So here we get the first like real shock. Well, this is probably the second shock after the face hugger coming out the egg, of the face hugger dropping onto Ripley's shoulder. But we can instantly see that the face hugger is kind of dying, or it's already dead. It's performed its function, shall we say, and put its egg inside Kane, and now it's just dead. It's achieved its goal. And I love this shot here of the underside of the face hugger. To think in the world of the movie, all of that was pressed up against Kane's face. And as a kid, when I used to watch this, I always used to think, oh my God, that looks so real, just the texture of it and the fluid. And it turns out it's just a cup that's filled with oysters. They went down to the local fishery and just bought a load of oysters, and Ridley Scott dressed them in the face hugger shell, so it just acted like a container. But I mean, it works brilliantly. It gives the actor something to interact with, and he can prod around, and it just looks absolutely amazing. So this is where Ripley is saying we should just destroy it, but Ash wants to take it back to Earth so they can further study it, and Dallas sides with Ash, much to Ripley's annoyance. Some of the background detail, they say that Ripley and Dallas were lovers in terms of the crew. I've read various articles that talk about if they were in deep space for a long time, it would make sense that some of the crew members would form a physical relationship just to help with the loneliness. And they suggested that Dallas and Ripley were lovers. And that Lambert was probably having sex with either Parker or Brett or both of them. And there's a little hint of that in the scene coming up where they sat round the dinner table, where Parker says something quite rude, and you get a little look on Lambert's face as she laughs at him. A little bit of flirting going on there. It's an interesting idea. Obviously, it doesn't really matter in terms of the movie, but it's interesting to see whether that would have happened. Because there is a little bit of a fizz between Dallas and Ripley. So there we are, taking the Nostromo off of the LV-426, and they're all glad to be leaving. So even lifting off and flying back through the atmosphere has some peril associated with it. So the forklift truck is now lifting the model as opposed to lowering it. I like how when they successfully take off, that there's a little sense of relief coming up, and a little bit of joviality to it, as if they realize that it's a big thing that they've just achieved, and they can kind of breathe a sigh of relief that they've got all of that behind them. So now you could actually say this is where the movie properly starts, because Ridley Scott has always called this movie a haunted house movie, with the haunted house being the Nostromo and the ghost being the alien. So effectively, this is now the beginning of the movie. Everything up to this point has just been exposition to get them to that point. So there's Brett rolling his slightly dubious cigarettes. Apparently he did used to smoke a lot of cannabis on the set, and the documentary I was telling you about with Ridley Scott's Driver, he also talks about driving Harry Dean Stanton to various locations, when they were eating out in the evening or whatever. And he said there'd be a smell of marijuana whenever he got in the car. So this is where Lambert tells them that they've still got a long journey back home. So they're going to have to go back into hypersleep. Again, fantastic set, the galley where they all eat. It's just really, really well done. I just love it. They can do no wrong with this movie. So there's John Hurt waking up. For the longest time, there's a line of dialogue he says in this scene that I could never work out what he said. And then it was only recently that I realized it was what he said. And they asked him, what is the last thing that he remembers? And he says, smothering. And for the longest time, I couldn't work out what he was saying there, but it was the word smothering, as if he was aware of the actual facehugger on his face. Yeah. It's such a shame that John Hurt's character is the first one to die, because he's such a fantastic actor. And anybody that's watched him in David Lynch's The Elephant Man will know for sure how great an actor he is. He's absolutely amazing in that movie. So here we are. We're building up to the most famous scene in the movie. Not my favorite scene in the movie, but the most famous. This is the scene that everybody thinks of when they talk about Alien, where they sat around and Kane is about to be killed by the chest burster bursting out of him. Little look from Ash there. I don't know whether you noticed that, but Ash is as if he knows something's going to happen and he's just waiting for it to happen. And the acting in this scene, John Hurt's acting as he's giving birth, as he describes it, is just absolutely incredible. And apparently, the actual moment when it bursts out of John Hurt, obviously they would have filmed this up to the point where he falls back on the table screaming, and then they called cut, and all the actors left the set apart from John Hurt, and then John Hurt had to be rigged on the table, so his body was underneath the table and there was a false body on top. And then they brought all the actors back in once everything was ready. And Sigourney Weaver tells the story that she came back in and she could see the cameraman and Ridley Scott and all the others had plastic sheeting over them because they knew it was going to get messy in terms of blood. And Ron Cobb, the production designer, tells a funny story that he watched the dailies of this sequence. So he saw many, many takes of the chest burster coming out and blood spraying everywhere. And he says, and he remembers that they spent the best part of a morning watching all of these different takes of this sequence. And he says he was so sort of shocked by it and being exposed to it for that amount of time that he says when they'd finished watching the dailies, he got up and he walked straight into a wall. He said he was so like dazed by it all that he just walked straight into a wall. Everybody says, why does Ash say don't touch it? Because he's effectively letting them let it go. But it's got acid for blood, or he thinks it may have acid for blood. So is that the reason? Or does he genuinely want it to survive? Right, so it is now 57 minutes in exactly at this point now. So I'm going to pause it there and I'm going to take a little break and change my microphone. And that's the end of part one. So if you enjoyed that, please look out for part two, which will be coming up in the next few days. So I'll see you very shortly.